There were once three people arguing about what is the first profession to be mentioned in the Torah. Certainly that must be the greatest one. The doctor said it's medicine because it says that God took the rib out of Adam and performed surgery and created a woman. The engineer said, no. It was engineering. It says God fashioned order out of chaos. The politician said, where do you think he got the chaos? The Torah has a lot of firsts in it, and we read it not to find out scientifically how everything got here, but in order to find out the thoughts and understanding of our people long ago and some of the spiritual truths. Many people envisioned in their mythology that each group of people had their own God who created them to be superior to all others. And the other people were afterthoughts. Even in some Native American myths, it said that God had an oven where he was baking the clay. The white people came out too soon. Black people stayed in a little too long. Native Americans came out just right. Maybe they did. They were a remarkable group before we decimated their population and destroyed their culture. The Torah has some remarkable insights that are still valuable to us today. After Adam is said to have sinned, God calls out, Ayeka, where are you? Well, if God's all-knowing, why would he have to say, where are you? Wouldn't he know? He wasn't speaking physically. Where are you physically? He meant, Ayeka, where are you spiritually? Where are you going? What are you doing? What kind of future are you building by your actions? That, my friends, is why we're here today, to ask ourselves, Ayeka, where are we? Where have we been this last year? Where have we been as a country, as a Jewish people, as a species? Where are we going? What are we doing? There was once a chimpanzee who was reading Darwin's Origin of Species and the Bible. The zookeeper came in and said, why are you reading both of those books? He said, I want to know if I'm my brother's keeper or my keeper's brother. It turns out he's both. We are related to the primates, sharing a common ancestor. And the rest of the Torah answers the question that we are our brother's keeper and that we are responsible one for another. The story in Genesis is quite fanciful. Fortunately, most Jews, not all, most Jews don't take it literally. If we did and believed that these myths were true, we would be myth-guided, myth-informed, myth-led, mythogenistic, and have a whole bunch of other miscellaneous false notions. Sadly, many of our more traditional brothers and sisters still cling to the myth. But one thing that we do know as we look back on what actually occurred, how did humanity get to be the way we are? The Torah comes kind of close, perhaps by coincidence or perhaps by some long-forgotten memory of our species and the collective unconscious. Because what happened originally was that our ancestors, primate ancestors, were living comfortably in the savannah, or in the forest, rather, of Africa. They pretty much had what they needed. Wasn't much need to evolve or change because their food literally grew on trees. Things were fine until the climate change occurred and the forest started shrinking. And as the forest shrank more and more, there wasn't enough room for all the primates, and some of them ventured forth onto open ground. When they left their comfort zone, my friends, they would never turn back and nothing would ever be the same. In order to survive in that environment where there were predators much tougher, much fiercer, much bigger, with much sharper teeth and claws than they had to adapt. They had to change to survive. They developed hands with opposable thumbs that could construct tools. They constructed language so that they would be able to communicate with one another. And they also enlarged their brain power so that they could compete by using their intelligence. And that, my friends, is what has separated us from those who remained behind in the forests. The Jewish people have taken those advantages of our species and developed them to an amazing degree, which is the marvel of humanity. Our ancestors who left the trees did something else. They learned to walk upright. They learned to see straight ahead, and they faced the future with courage, no longer slouching. And our ancestors did the same thing. They faced a hostile world. They could have been given up on their dreams, but they stood upright and tried to live a life that was morally upright, standing tall. They not only developed language, they were the people of the book, offering literature and teachings, morality to the world. They used and developed their minds, teaching their children that if you want to show that you're an adult, it doesn't take power. It doesn't take physical strength. It doesn't involve killing an animal or competing with other people physically. You want to show that you're mature. Show that your mind has been developed and your heart and your soul with a bar mitzvah. By learning, that is what separates us from the others. Leaving the comfort zone of the forest was essential to growth. Later on, our people were in Egypt. Our people there were suffering greatly. But many of them preferred suffering in Egypt than facing the unknown and trying to deal with change. We find it hard to believe. You mean people would rather be a slave? The Torah says so. The people were constantly complaining to Moses, saying to him, "Why did you take us out of Egypt?" They looked back at it as if it was so wonderful. Don't we do that, my friends? Don't we think of what we do every day in our daily routine and our customs, our habits, our old ways of thinking? Don't we get used to them and think how comfortable they are? Enslaved by our bad habits. Shackled by old ways of thinking. Yes, the Torah records. They said to Moses, "Why did you have to speak up? Why couldn't you have left us alone? We had free room and board back in Egypt. We had food instead of this horrible manna, this amazing miracle from heaven that they took for granted. We had all different types of food. We had no worries about work. We had full employment. We didn't have to face the unknown. We knew what to expect." Many of us are complacent. We've been given this incredible gift of life and amazing minds. a beautiful heritage, so much to accomplish. We'd rather just stay in our rut. So they said to Moses, take us back. And because of that poor attitude, they were forced to wander in the wilderness for that entire generation, never approaching the promised land because they thought it was too scary. My friends, change is scary. But unless you're willing to take a risk, you'll never, ever make it to your promised land. All achievement requires risk. Moses was the epitome of someone willing to leave his comfort zone in order to accomplish something better. According to the Torah, Moses was living in a palace. He had everything physically that he could have wanted. Anything he wanted was his. But when he saw someone else suffering, he was no longer complacent. He couldn't be comfortable knowing that someone else was suffering. Many of us, we're perfectly content with our lives, even though other people are suffering. As long as we have it made. Moses wasn't like that. Moses answered to a higher authority. He was a Hebrew national who answered to a higher authority, and he relished freedom. He mustered the courage to take on the role of a savior. He was frank in furthering the cause of truth by speaking up to Pharaoh. He was hot on the trail and dogged in pursuit of justice so that he could be a blessing and get our people out of a pickle. Moses was an extraordinary person. But in his day, he was criticized bitterly by his people, constantly harangued. Moses, why must you be so political? Moses, why are you talking about Pharaoh? Stick to the prayers, Moses. Stop talking about what's going on in the world. Even today, some of our synagogues are more interested in profits and loss than prophets, P-R-O-P-H-E-T-S, and laws of morality. I think we should just be confined and support the status quo. That is not following in the footsteps of Moses. They want us to mute ourselves in the face of terrible things that are going on in the world. A near takeover of our government and the toppling, the attempted toppling of our precious democracy. The effort to prevent women from exercising control over their own reproductive systems. People who deny the greatest human achievement of all, of science that allows us to be here today because of the discovery of vaccines and so many things that allow us to live beyond 20. Without science, we'd never make it past 20 or 25. They deny science, deny climate change, deny the coronavirus, deny evolution, deny the greatest intellectual achievements, so that we are now suffering the ravages of climate change. 40 years ago, they were warned. And we are supposed to remain silent? My friends, I ask you, how is it possible to follow in the footsteps of Moses without challenging Pharaoh? And Pharaoh is still here. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, who marched with Martin Luther King, he's told us that religion is worthless unless it challenges us and pushes us beyond our comfort zone. He said the original conference, interfaith conference, he met Martin Luther King at an interfaith conference. The original one was between Pharaoh and Moses, and it's still going on today. Malala Yousafzai understands the need to speak up and to leave her comfort zone. She said, when the world is silent, even one voice becomes powerful. I'd also like to share with you the comments, the prescient comments by one of the greatest Americans who ever lived, Frederick Douglass. In 1857, he said, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power conceives nothing without demand. It never did, and it never will." And it was Heschel who said, "Little does contemporary religion ask of man. It is ready to offer comfort. It has no courage to challenge. It is ready to offer edification. It has no courage to break the idols, to shatter callousness. The trouble is that religion has become religion, institution, dogma, ritual. It is no longer an event. Its acceptance involves neither risk nor strain." He was trying to say, beware of the dogma. It can be catastrophic. One other story I'd like to share with you before I depart. It was Henry David Thoreau. He didn't pay his taxes because he didn't want to support a government that was supporting slavery and war that he didn't believe in. He withheld his taxes, and he was tossed into jail. His good friend Ralph Waldo Emerson came to visit, and he said, "Henry, what are you doing in there?" And he said, "Waldo, what are you doing out there? Why are you here protesting? Why are you raising your voice?" That was the first instance of someone asking, "Where's Waldo? Where is Waldo?" And so I returned. I returned to where I started. Ayeka. Where are you? Where are we? Where are we as a Jewish people? Are we inside in the struggle? Are we involved in that struggle? Are we part of the in crowd? I don't mean the popular crowd. I mean the in crowd, the Jewish crowd, the one who uses intelligence, initiative, inspiration, and gets involved. Are we part of that crowd? And I ask, can we be part of the force in the world that's going to make a change and a turn? Teshuvah means to turn. And so as I conclude, I share with you this. We must turn from servility to civility. We must turn from partisanship to partnership. We must turn from using arms to shoot people to use our arms to hug people. We must turn from lies to life by respecting women's rights. We must turn from wealth for the few to health for all with universal health care. We must turn from blind faith or bland faith to bold faith. We must turn from going through the motions of religion to the emotions of religion and feel the pain that we cause by our actions and our inactions. We must return to living in harmony with the planet rather than harming the planet. We have now become the angel of death, determining who shall live and which species shall die. But lest you get too depressed from all of this, the Jewish people has an indomitable spirit and believes that we can overcome because we start the day in the evening, followed by the morning, because we believe the darkness is always followed by the light. As said in French, c'est parfois au cours des heures plus sombres que naisse la plus belle lumière. It is perhaps at the darkest hour that is born the greatest light. And so at this dark hour, when we are plagued by all types of diseases of the mind and of the body, I believe that we will now be able to see our way out and be able to turn so that we can finally be the people that Jews were meant to be, a light unto the nations. L'Shana Tova.